What theory, phenomenon or idea blows your mind when you think about it? Charles Bonnet. It's a condition that only occurs in people with severe sight loss and causes very vivid, unusual hallucinations. One of my patients kept seeing gnomes in her house and felt totally chill about it. In terms of phenomenon, I always think of the Carrington event. In the 19th century, the world experienced a solar event of unprecedented scale, called the Carrington event, after the astronomer who first identified and studied it. It took the form of a massive solar flare, called a coronal mass ejection, CME. The CME bombarded the Earth with basically a galactic electromagnetic pulse, completely flattening the magnetosphere and immobilizing Earth's inherent electromagnetic shielding until it was over. Fortunately, at the time, Earth's electronic infrastructure was still in its infancy, although the event did cause telegraph wires to melt and telegraph machines themselves to catch fire. Then, in 2012, a CME of equal or greater magnitude than the Carrington event was recorded. It passed directly through the Earth's orbit, while we were on the other side of the sun. Imagine if we had been in the splash zone of something like that. With how vital our electronic infrastructure has become in our daily lives, Reddit and the internet would immediately cease to exist as servers become fried and destroyed. Anyone connected to a life support machine would be dead unless the life support techniques can be done manually or with analog technology. Satellites for communication, weather prediction, scientific study, GPS systems, and anything else man-made in orbit around Earth would be damaged to the point of useless space junk. It would be an apocalyptic level event. And it almost happened. The sun completes a rotation on its axis about once every 3 weeks. So if that CME happened either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after it took place, well, the world would be a suddenly and dramatically different place. The fact that our brain cannot feel anything at all, but it makes our body feel everything. Speakers. How the duck can they accurately create sounds just by moving a teeny bit? It's just a coil around a magnet, but damn. How much collective work is put into every single thing around us? Pick up a book. The author was not the only one responsible for it being in your hand. So was the owner of the publishing company, the factory worker making sure it was printing correctly, and many others. Look at a building. From the mind of the architect that designed it, the contractor in charge of building it, the construction worker who put his sweat and hard work into those walls. An apple you might have for a snack goes through many people, like the farmer, to the distributor, to the grocer that stocked it on the shelf. Pretty much everything around us had so many people working on it, many that you don't even consider. That's pretty amazing to me. The insane coincidence that the sun and the moon appear nearly identical in size from our position. That gravity slows down time. We are closer to the year 2044 than 1990. False vacuum theory. Possibly one day a single particle will drop to a true lowest energy state and set off a reaction that rewrites chemistry as we know it. Can we just talk about language in its entirety? Especially written language. Right now, you are looking at nothing but strange connections and spacing of random lines. Within these lines, however, you are able to understand, process, and interpret a complex idea about how strange it is that these symbols can be used to describe any idea at all, let alone something as complicated as the sciences or philosophy. But not only that, but by changing just one symbol, I can change the idea. To see what I mean, the difference between you love me and you love me is astounding. The different scenario running through your mind when you read each of those symbols is completely different. Entire stories and thoughts, dictated by AskReddit. Edit. Damn. I go to bed and go from 100 karma to 65 bloody 100 and gilded on a post that was already 6 hours old when I posted. Thanks for the gold. And thanks for the discussions. That humans have existed for thousands and thousands of years, but technology like automobiles and airplanes, which many of us take for granted, have only existed for less than 200 years. It's not exactly a phenomenon, but I think it is. More so, it's just the idea that gives me chills every day, smacks me in the face every waking moment. The fact that there are over 7 billion people out there, living lives. Every person has a world of their own, a life full of friends, foes, Goodness and woes. There are hundreds of millions of places housing people, housing memories, and every person has a tale to tell, a place to go, something to strive for. There's a backstory to every single existing one of us. It's absolutely amazing, absolutely mind-blowing. Edit, grammar. The fact that there is a finite number of times anything in your life will occur. Heartbeats, kisses, times you say For some reason it messes with me, even though it's mundane. There is an exact amount of coffee, for example, I will drink in my lifetime and I have no clue what it is. Relative size of the universe, especially versus Planck length. The fact that some birds can articulately mimic human speech. If your dog said a complete sentence to you that you could fully understand, you'd lose your it. There is an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 1. Also, black holes. That either the universe always existed or there was a point where nothing existed and the universe just started. That I am the offspring of an unbroken chain of reproduction that spans back to the first living being on this planet. Edit, Free Catalonia, and Schadalband. What the duck was there before the Big Bang? How the duck did it even happen? Still struggle to get my head around the placebo effect. Our bodies are truly amazing. The Library of Babel. A vast library containing all possible 410-page books of a certain format and character set. Basically, it contains all the possible permutations of a given alphabet over a certain number of pages. While most books are going to be nonsense, there is also your complete biography and every possible versions of your life. There is also Hamlet, same as the original, just with a mistake on page 23, and another version of Hamlet with a mistake on page 22, and so on. There is also a cure for cancer, a unified theory of physics. Well, there is an answer to every question one might ask. The only problem is that if you were to find such library, you would not know where to start. There are approximately 25 circumflex 1,312,000 books in it. The Great Filter, or more specifically the Fermi Paradox. Based on what we know from archaeology and remote sensing of our planet, we have no evidence of aliens having visited here. Based on what we know about life, how it occurs, and how we got here, and how old some other stars and planets are compared to ours, we'd expect to see some sign of interstellar alien life by now. That's not the part that blows my mind. The idea is about the Great Filter. There exists some burden on the odds that we simply aren't accounting for. Is the development of self-replicating biology so rare? We had two ideas of how primordial soup could develop into life. Solar fuel or mineral heat fuel in ocean vents. Is it the difficulty of developing interstellar travel the sticking point? Availability of metals? Threat of driving ourselves extinct before we manage to colonize other worlds? Is intelligence not usually so valuable for life forms? And things like sharks are more common results of evolution? Do events of solar weather or asteroid collisions plague planets more often than we can observe? And we're just 3 or 4 standard deviations out there. The luckiest roll in universal history with an assist from Mars and Jupiter. The Slinger and Pariah. Jupiter cockblocks a lot of asteroids that would otherwise be Earthbound. The chilling question goes, is the Great Filter something we've already hurdled? Or a challenge we've failed to anticipate? The brain named itself. That scale doesn't stop and always exists. There is a scale that exists right now. A viewpoint from where a crumb lying nearby you is the size of Mount Everest. Like actually a colossal, mountainous, looming object that blocks out light for, at that scale, miles and has long valleys, ridges and cliffs. Even if there is nothing there to view it, the viewpoint still exists. And there is also a scale that exists right now. A viewpoint from which that same crumb is the size of a planet, a sun, a solar system. Sure, quarks are the smallest thing we know of, but even if there wasn't anything smaller, that doesn't mean there doesn't exist a view scale from which quarks aren't massive. And the fact that that scale viewpoint is infinite, it will never stop shrinking. It will never stop getting bigger. You can almost fall into it. Just thinking about it. There are stars that make us look like dust and dust that makes us look like stars. It goes infinitely in both ways and we just happen to be at this particular junction. And at any particular junction point, things must look amazing. Edit. Perhaps a better attempt at explaining this. That we are given plastic bags by the billion to carry our shopping home in. They're used for a few minutes and then discarded to pollute the earth for hundreds of years. And we're still discovering further ways that they pollute. And they're still being given out by the billion. Although I'm not religious, I have never been able to wrap my mind around the idea of eternal life after death. Edit. Reading all the responses to this thread really has me mind ducked. What is outside the universe? What does the universe exist in? How does the universe even exist? How can something exist? If it exists in something, what does that thing exist in? What the hell happened before the Big Bang? What was the nature of the universe before that? Why did the Big Bang happen? It like this makes me a bit anxious sometimes. See the absurdity of reality. All the other things can be explained by the laws of physics. But how do you explain the laws of physics and reality itself? I really cannot handle not being able to understand. Better not to dwell too much on it. The fact that such highly organized creatures like humans, all animals really, are just very specific interactions between different atoms. The fact that we're just hurtling in a spinning spiral at millions of miles a second through just nothingness that goes on forever. Okay. Maybe not millions of miles per second, but it was for dramatic effect. 111,111,111 x 111,111,111 equals 12. 345. 678. 987. 654. 321. The fact that there are colors we have never seen. The amount of empty space inside an atom is similar to the amount of empty space inside the solar system. So the vast majority of your body, or your car, or your desk is just empty space. Estimates are about 99.9999999999996% empty. Every time we figure out how the universe works, it resets itself and gets a little bit more complicated and harder to fully comprehend. My 6mo daughter is a person. There's a whole person in there, and I've barely gotten to know her yet, and I'll never know all of her, just as she'll never know all of me. Fascinating. Sonder. N. The realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own are populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries and inherited craziness, also an epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground, with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives that you'll never know existed, in which you might appear only once, as an extra sipping coffee in the background, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, as a lighted window at dusk. Quantum theory is so unintuitive that my brain explodes and I realize that I'm not as smart as I wish I was. If you shuffle a deck of cards, you probably made history. That you really can't prove anything exists outside of your own consciousness. I'll most likely be alive for less than 80 years. I'll be dead for billions of years. The Great Pyramid was built circa 2560 BC. Cleopatra lived 69 BC, so 30 BC. The first moon landing was in 1969 AD. Which means Cleopatra lived closer to the moon landing than she did to the building of the Great Pyramid. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, where you hear a word or phrase for the first time in your life and then hear it again within 24 hours approximately. The Circle of Fifths. The Circle of Fifths shows the relationships among the 12 tones of the chromatic scale, their corresponding key signatures and the associated major and minor keys. In simple terms, the Circle of Fifths is a music theory diagram for finding the key of a song, transposing songs to different keys, composing new songs and understanding key signatures, scales and modes. Diagram. Panspermia. There are bacteria on our planet that could survive the vacuum of space. If a large asteroid struck the Earth, it could potentially send pieces of Earth containing these bacteria flying out into the galaxy. These chunks of Earth could then seed new life in other parts of the universe. So a cataclysmic event here could lead to brand new life elsewhere in the universe. This could be the primary way that life is spread between planets. I cannot for the life of me understand how most commercials or marketing in general actually is successful in making people buy products. I cannot for one moment believe, for example, that anyone in the world chooses a car based on 20 seconds of nonsense and a kid whispering zoom zoom, and yet the company has paid untold dollars, I'm sure, to make those commercials happen. Solipsism. The philosophic understanding that the trust you have in your observations and memories are assumptions, and possibly misplaced. How do you know that this is reality, that you are not delusional, that this is not a dream? How do you know that you're not plugged into the matrix? It started with I think, therefore I am, and attempted to prove anything else as true as that. It failed so utterly that it altered the statement to I think, therefore something probably is, or does it? The ladder paradox and the conclusion that simultaneity is not absolute. I can wrap my head around most of special relativity, but this particular piece for whatever reason I just can't understand. That flat earthers are still a thing. Just to quote Randall Munro a bit on supernovas, however big you think supernovae are, they're bigger than that. Here's a question to give you a sense of scale. Which of the following would be brighter, in terms of the amount of energy delivered to your retina? A supernova, seen from as far away as the sun is from the earth, or the detonation of a hydrogen bomb pressed against your eyeball? Applying the physicist rule of thumb suggests that the supernova is brighter, and indeed, it is, by 9 orders of magnitude. Fermi's paradox. Are we alone, or are we just one of millions of intelligent beings in the universe? Anything to do with the idea that there are an infinite number of parallel universes that account for every possible outcome. If it's true, that means there's a version of me where everything has gone absolutely perfectly. I imagine he lives in a mansion with a harem of supermodels. He doesn't even exist in this universe and I hate his guts. The fact that when the sun touches the horizon at sundown it is already out of sight below the horizon. What we see is a mirage. I like to think about every single person in the history of mankind that have stood where I've stood at that point. For example, in front of the Eiffel Tower there are probably millions of people who have had their feet right where mine have been. Those people all have a separate set of experiences, ideas, opinions, and values, but we stood in the same place. Then you imagine that in less common areas, like maybe 100 years ago the person that stood where I am now went on to fight in World War II or raised their kids in a house that used to be where my apartment is now. Those people would have no idea that I would ever exist, but we stood in the same place. There is a plant called the bee orchid. This plant has evolved over time to resemble the female bumblebee, so male bumblebees will try to mate with it and pollinate it. Plants don't have intelligence, eyes or a brain, so how did it know what pollinated it be, what it looks like and see how to change its entire makeup to look like this plant? Blows my mind. That the universe is still expanding. The hell is it expanding into? I have nothing of virtue to add to this question thread. Just wanted to comment how all these responses have severely ducked me up for the evening. Thanks, Reddit. String theory. I can hardly even conceptualize it. TBH. Each hemisphere of your brain may be a completely separate conciseness working together to make you. That the universe just isn't, possibly has always just been. As humans, we think linearly. There's a beginning and end. There may not be a beginning or end to the universe. It just is. I honestly can't wrap my head around it. That everything you've ever felt, heard, saw, or experienced has only been an approximation of reality, a fraction of reality. We are like a dog watching a human use his cell phone, incapable of even knowing. We should be amazed, unable to understand not only what is happening, but even that something is happening. There's entire universes on top of us that could be inches away and we would not notice a thing. The self does not exist. You can separate the hemispheres of someone's brain, an operation to treat epilepsy, and basically theoretically create two separate people. When one of their eyes is covered, half of the brain can no longer see. Show the open eye a solution to a problem and the corresponding hand will be able to solve that problem. Now cover the opposite eye and ask the other hand to solve that same problem. They cannot do it because that half of the brain has not seen the solution. Basically we are just a bunch of cells fighting for their own survival. Synesthesia. The fact that people can see sounds blows my mind. The fact that everything written can be expressed using just 26 letters. Those 26 letters can sequence into the most passionate love letter. Or they can be a terrorist manifesto. They can write poetry, but can also write my 5-year-old shopping list of made up words. They can explain the theory of quantum physics, or can tell a stupid joke. It blows my mind that just 26 characters can be used to describe the entire gamut of human emotion and experience by simply changing the order. That the universe is expanding at a rate that is increasing, as in, everything is being flung outward from some unseen point, and is speeding up. I am not of a scientific bent and this is simplifying it. The ocean. Ducking vast, deep, harboring diverse life. Death also amazes yet scares me. Humans are just vessels for the evolution of ideas. To us, it's adaptation. But most concepts seem to follow an evolution-like Darwinian pattern. If it doesn't work, it dies out and we choose the more fit belief, with some coexisting despite filling the same niche. They're affected by region. Although commerce and media have caused a lot of invasive species recently. A lot of cool math results are mind-blowing. Here's a short list. You can cut a sphere, on the real plane, into pieces such that you can reassemble the pieces to make 2 spheres, each of equal size to the original sphere. There are as many natural numbers as there are integers as there are rationals. But there are more reals than there are naturals, integers, or rationals. There are an infinite number of sizes of infinity. The set of taking all the sets with infinite size is sizeless, sort of. There's no way to form a set of axioms in math that allow you to be free of contradiction. That is, you can't prove both that blah is true and blah is false, and also be complete. That is, be able to prove at least one of the two of blah is true and blah is false, for basic arithmetic with self-referential statements. Please correct me if I made any mistakes for any of these. The fact that we can be mistaken about the motivation behind our own actions, and that it is a common occurrence. This blows my mind because it means I'm not the one making the actions. I only witness them and try to explain them, and my explanation of my actions actually affects what I do in the future. An infinite universe. If we got here how we think we did, against astronomical odds, that means it can happen again, no matter how small the odds are. If the universe is infinite, then that basically means the dice is being rolled over and over and over. So eventually it will happen again. Not just life, but a solar system just like ours, with humans just like us, with humans exactly like US. Another dead B100 cuts sitting in a lazy boy recliner typing this exact message out on his phone. The double slit experiment, and more importantly the experiment which showed that it didn't matter if the wave passed through the slit and was observed between the slits and the detection screen. It is as if the wave knew it would be observed before it was emitted so as to behave like a particle. This and entanglement seem to support that the universe is deterministic and there is no free will. However, the many worlds theory allows this while maintaining free will. Is free will an illusion? Please read up on it and make up your own mind. That someone came up with a language that we are speaking now. Also people who decided to name the months.